Hello, friends. I'm Professor Smita Jha from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, and we are doing a course on health, humanities, and disability, and under which I'm discussing graphic memoir and its various aspects. Today, in the lecture, I'm going to discuss the gutter and the panel as one of the important aspects of graphic memoir. So, let us discuss role of gutter in graphic memoir for bridging gaps in memory. So, the gutter in a graphic memoir acts as a vital temporal bridge, transforming static, disjointed panels into a continuous narrative by bridging gaps in time, action, and memory. So, what are the key functions of gutter in graphic memoir? Trauma representation. In art, specimens, moss, the gutter serves as a visual representation of the fragmented nature of memory and trauma, bridging the gap between the past as a survivor and art's present day documentation. Co-authoring narrative. The gutter forces the reader to co-author the narrative by interpreting what happens in the limbo between, making the reader an active participant in understanding the author's life. Temporal flexibility, it handles time manipulation, moving from flashbacks to the present instantaneously, far more flexible than linear narrative media. Now, let us explore further how gutter can be temporal mechanism. Some of the contributing factors include active reconstruction. As theorized by Scott McCloud in Understanding Comics, the gutter enables reader to take two separate images and through imagination create a single narrative idea. Bridging time and memory in memoirs, the gutter connects the past, recall memory, with the present, the act of remembering, allowing for non-linear storytelling and the blending of time periods. The stutter of memory, repeated frames or gutters can represent trauma or shuttering memory, slowing down time to emphasize emotional impact, particularly in autobiographical work. In graphic memoir, the stutter of memory refers to the intentional use of visual repetition, fragmented panels, and the gaps between panels, gutters to represent the non-linear, broken, and traumatic nature of recalling the past. Furthermore, it refers to the way the comic medium uses visual repetition, gaps, and fragmentation to represent the nonlinear, often intrusive nature of trauma and recollection. Unlike traditional prose, which often smooths over the seam of memory, graphic memoirs use the specific grammar of comics. The gutter, the panel, and the repeated frame mirror the way memory can stall, repeat, or break down. This technique, often called shuttering art, mirrors the way trauma disrupts narrative flow, forcing reader to actively reconstruct meaning from disjointed, repetitive, or missing information notes. Some of the key aspects of the stutter of memory in graphic memoirs include the gutter as trauma space. Following theories from a scholar like Hilary Chute, the blank space between panels, the gutter, acts as a visual representation of repressed or unarticulable traumatic memories where the reader must fill in the missing broken information. Repetition and shuttering panels similar to a verbal shutter, visual repetition of frames or scenes that is in Alison Bachel's work shows the mind fixating on or revisiting painful moments, illustrating the inability to move past a specific event. Autographic icon, the creator's own hand drawn image serves as a visual fiction or caricature that highlights the shutter between the actual past self and the current representation of the self. Visualizing disordered memory, the medium allows artists to show that memory is not linear, utilizing overlapping, chaotic, or non sequential imagery to represent flashbacks, emotional disturbance, and the struggle to construct a coherent personal history. So, we will discuss this factor in much detail in the later part of this lecture. Some famous examples of gutter and slutter of memory include Alison Bechdel Fun Home, Are You My Mother? Uses hand-drawn photographs and repetitive mirror scenes to explore intergenerational trauma and the mother wound. Art specimen Moss frequently uses the space between panels to navigate the shuttling between a survivor's memory of the Holocaust and their present day life. Majani Satrapi Persepolis leverages the grammar of comics to make the reader actively navigate the gaps in history and personal experience. Let us now come back to focusing on essential factor, that is visualizing disordered memory in a graphic memoir. Graphic memoirs effectively visualize disordered memory, trauma, and cognitive decline by using fragmented panels, surreal imagery, and nonlinear storytelling to represent subjective experiences that words alone cannot capture. Through technique like graphic medicine, creators reconstruct memory gaps, making mental illness and dementia visible. Key techniques for visualizing memory in graphic memoirs include fragmented panel and disjointed layout, panels that overlap, break apart, or lack a clear reading order demonstrate the fractured nature of memory and trauma. Visual metaphor and symbolism. Authors use recurring motifs to represent feelings. For example, broken vases or torn images can signify fragmented memories of loss. Reenactment of subjective experiences by portraying childhood scenes through an adult's eye or using surreal art style, creators can show the disorientation of memory. Embodied drawing and materializing memory, the physical, tactile nature of comics, such as drawing style variations, highlights the bodily impact of memory. Combining documents and memory, the blending of photos, diaries, and illustrations can create a sense of fragmented yet authentic past recollection. Prominent example of graphic memoirs that include elements of visualizing disordered memory. Marbles, Mania, Depression, and Michelangelo and Me by Ellen Forney illustrate bipolar disorder through high energy, chaotic, and manic imagery. Fun Home by Alison Bechdel uses intricate panels and visual repetition to show the constructed and performed nature of memory. Hyperbole and a Half by Ali Brosh employs simple expressive drawings to represent emotional chaotic states of depression. My Degeneration, A Journey Through Parkinson's by Peter Dunlap Sohel documents cognitive decline through visual storytelling. These works often allow for a better understanding of how memory and cognition function or fail within a person's life, helping clinicians and caretakers understand the patient experience. Now, let us discuss some important techniques for representing memory in graphic memoirs. First is visual metaphors. As discussed earlier, artists often use symbolic imagery to present cognitive gaps. For example, Nicola Streeton uses a broken vase in Billy, Me, and You to represent the trauma of loss. Second technique is photographic integration. Many memoirs, such as those by Miriam Catine, embedded real photographs or graphic renderings of documentary evidence to act as anchors of authenticity against the fluidity of subjective memory. Third is nonlinear paneling. By breaking standard grid structures, author can illustrate the multiplicity of selves and the way traumatic memories resist a chronological flow. Fourth technique is material interventions. Some works use physical actions like folding, cutting, or reassembling pages to mimic the physical impact of trauma on memory. Now we will analyze this important technique in greater detail. Material intervention in graphic memoirs involves artists incorporating non-drawn elements such as photographs, documents, or tactile textures to disrupt traditional narration, act as evidence, and bridge memory with reality. These techniques, often blending documentary with aesthetic, enhance emotional truth, demonstrate traumatic memory, and encourage active reader engagement, reconstructing personal history. Some of the key material interventions include photographs and documents. Using actually photos alongside cartoon collapses the distance between the past and the present, providing evidence of existence while contrasting with subjective cartoon memories. Ephemera and archives, incorporating letters, diaries, maps, and childhood drawings, reinforces the autobiographical authenticity of the narrative. Haptic visuality, tactile quality, focusing on the texture of drawing that is cross hatching as much as making the reading experience felt by the body crucial in trauma narratives to represent non integrated memories. A structural manipulation, authors use panel composition, page layouts, and the gutter, a space between panels, to force readers to pause, escape, or engage with the narrative pace. Furthermore, the functions of material interventions in graphic memoirs include shifting perspective. The interaction between textual narrative and visual material often creates a divergence, highlighting the gap between what was lived and what is remembered. Validation of experience in graphic medicine by degeneration. Such intervention validate patient experience and create community. Embodied memory. These materials such as anchors for fragmented memories, allowing creators to explore personal and historical trauma. Let us delve deeper into the important function. Embodied memory in graphic memoirs uses visual storytelling to represent, re experience, and process trauma, health, and identity, often merging personal history with physical gestures and visceral sensation on the page. Through visual, tactile, and nonlinear narratives, authors materialize memory, allowing readers to feel the physical weight of experiences. Keywords and examples of embodied memory in graphic memoirs are: scholars often look at a specific text to study these embodied connections. Linda Barry, known for a collage like style that emphasizes the physical act of creation and autobiographical graphic narratives. Alison Bechdel, her works such as Fun Home and Are You My Mother use precise archival drawing to reconcile the physical details of her past with her current identity. Katie Green, in Lighter Than My Shadow, she uses scribbles and visuals noise to represent the physicality of illness and recovery. So, the key aspects of embodied memory in graphic memoir for the gestures and the re experience, instead of just narrating, even gestures can take the lead role with bodily movements such as shrugging or a terrified expression, illustrating emotional states, acting as dwelling with memory. The body in process, graphic memoirs often focus on the self in the making, where physical sensations and bodily experiences are central to recounting life identity and mental health journey. Materially reimagining trauma, authors use the comics medium to break down and revisualize traumatic experiences, allowing for a different kind of processing compared to purely text based memoirs. The power of visual representation. The unique semiotic nature of comics, combining image and text, allows for a visual depiction of the body's experience of illness or trauma, creating a powerful, often chaotic visual language of memory. Materializing trauma and history, graphic memoirs are often concerned with bringing 4 generations of family pain, trauma, or historical events into a tangible space, acting as a physical illustrated memory. We will now delve deeper into this important aspect. You might wonder, how can graphic memoir materialize memory? Comics and graphic memoirs transform abstract memories into tangible embodied art through several key techniques. The autographic trace, the creator's physical hand is visible in every line. This trace serves as a direct link between the author's body and the page, acting as a form of embodied drawing that testifies to their lived experience. Visual metaphor and the body, difficult internal states like the physical sensations of anxiety or illness are often drawn literally. For example, a character might be shown with black dog to represent depression or an oversized shadow to represent trauma. Doubled embodiment memoirs often show the author as both the witness narrator and the participants, the younger self, in the panels. This allows readers to see the physical impact of memory across different time frames simultaneously. haptic visuality. Authors use texture, scribbles, or heavy ink techniques, sometimes called haptic mark making, to make the reader feel the sensory weight of a memory beyond just seeing it. Transgenerational body. Some memoirs, like Moss Vietnamerica, explore how trauma is physically passed down through generations, showing how a child might carry a parent's memories in their own body and identity. Now, let us explore some important nuances of this technique. The concept of transgenerational body in graphic memoirs refers to how physical and emotional experiences, specifically trauma, memory, and identity, are visually depicted as being passed down from one generation's body to another. In this medium, the body is not just an individual vessel, but a site where ancestral history is physically manifested. Consequently, transgenerational trauma and memory are powerfully explored in graphic memoirs, using visual storytelling to bridge the gap between inherited historical trauma and individually embodied experience. This medium visually maps how the past haunts the present, transforming subjective memories, family stories, the archival history into a tangible narrative. Visual strategies for the transgenerational body. Graphic memoirs use the unique materiality of comics to make invisible inheritance visible. Physically mirroring, authors often draw their own adult bodies in ways that mirror the movements or nervous habits of their parents, visually linking their physicalities across time. The shadow body. Trauma is frequently depicted as a literal shadow or a ghostly presence that attaches itself to the body of the descendant, as seen in works like Art Spiegelman's Moss, where the mouse mask of the survivor casts a shadow over the child. Metaphorical metamorphosis. Creators use biological or surreal imagery such as roots, botanical growths, or grotesque distortions to show how historical trauma shapes the physical form of the next generation. Multisensory drawing. By attending to sensory details like a smell or touch in their illustrations, authors relocate the self within the historical body of their ancestor. Keywords and authors. Several prominent graphic memoirs explores this intersection of the body and inherited history. Miriam Catine, We Are on Our Own, Letting It Go, explores how the trauma of the Holocaust is physically carried by her and later her son, using shifts in color and style to represent the living memory of the body. Art Spiegelman Moss uses animal masks to represent the inherited identity and trauma that survivors pass down to their children. Thibault, The Best We Could Do, visually traces her family's history through the physical toll of displacement and war, literally mapping the surging hormones and physical changes of her mother onto the page. Linda Barry 100 Demands utilizes the materiality of childhood ephemera to investigate how the demons of past generations reside in the author's physical and creative life. Theo Paris Homebody, while focused on trans identity, it highlights how the relationship with one's body is often shaped by search for community and historical belonging that was previously absent. Furthermore, some of the key aspects and examples of the transgenerational body in graphic memoir include: first aspect is embodiment and memory. Graphic memoirs use the gutter, the space between panels, to represent the fragmentation of trauma and its belatedness. The visual nature allows authors to map how traumatic memories of parent manifest as physical changes or emotional distress in the second generation. Second aspect is cultural and diasporic memory. In Limbo, Deb Zeze Lee explores the impact of migration, mental health, and transgenerational cultural barriers. Thibault's The Best We Could Do, mentioned in context of In Limbo, often explores the haunting nature of familial and historical trauma across generations. third is visualizing the invisible. The genre enables artists to represent complex, unseen experiences of headspace ghost or memory gaps as seen in Emma Group, the third person. Fourth aspect is Holocaust and inherited trauma, medium Catines, We Are on Our Own 2006 and Letting It Go 2013 depict the author's experience as a child of survivor and her son's relationship with Berlin, showcasing a move toward healing through self-reflexivity. Art Spiegelman's Moss similarly shows how children of survivors inherit the identity, pain, and mouse mask of their parents. Let us discuss this aspect in more detail as it is an important one with graphic memoir. Graphic memoirs exploring the Holocaust and inherited trauma, often categorized as post memory, use visual storytelling to bridge the gap between survivor experiences and the second, third generations. These works show how trauma is transmitted through silence, memory, and behavioral patterns, highlighting the psychological impact. Some key graphic memoirs that include themes of Holocaust and inherited trauma include Moss, A Survivor's Tale by Art Spiegelman, the seminal work on this topic using animal metaphors to represent the Holocaust horrors and its lingering, haunting effects on his parents and himself. Never Again Will I Visit Auschwitz, a graphic family memoir of trauma and inheritance by Ari Richer, a recent work that weaves personal family history, genealogy, and the impact of the tree of life, shooting to explore inherited trauma. We Are on Our Own and Letting It Go by Marion Katine, and these works examine the creator's familial Holocaust history, her mother's survival, and her own struggle with the legacy. Heavyweight, a family story of the Holocaust, empire, and memory, an illustrated exploration of family dynamics, love, and the enduring weight of historical family. Here are some scholarly perspectives regarding this aspect of graphic memoirs. Victoria Iron's Holocaust Graphic Narratives, Generation Trauma and Memory. This work analyzes how these narratives send intergenerational psychological shock waves and create a new canon of visual memory. The mask metaphor in Moss. The mouse mask represents the inescapable identity and trauma passed down, allowing the author to explore the past while recognizing it cannot be fully relieved. Some of the major themes in graphic memoirs that has elemented of inherited trauma includes post-memory. Mariana Hirsch's concept that the second generation has a connection to the trauma of their parent, though they did not experience it directly, often characterized by imaginative investment and projection. Visualizing and unspeakable graphic novels use the interplay of text and image to articulate the unrecoverable loss and caesura. Silence and repetition, survivors may share experiences without context, leading to over identification and haunting unresolved trauma in their children. Transmitted trauma is about the transmission of survivor guilt, fear, and behavior scars, that is, depression, from parent to child, often disrupting childhood. Now, we will proceed in analyzing this especially major theme to deepen our understanding of inherited trauma within graphic memoirs. So, transmitted or intergenerational trauma in graphic memoirs is explored through a unique fusion of text and image, allowing authors to map how traumatic memoirs and behaviors are passed from one generation to the next. The medium uses fragmented panels and visual metaphors to represent the inexpressible nature of these inherited histories, facilitating a working through of memory that goes beyond narrative. In the realm of graphic memoirs, transmitted trauma or intergenerational trauma is the psychological phenomenon where the intense emotional pain and survival mechanisms of one generation, often those who lived through catastrophic events like war or genocide, are passed down to their descendants. These works use the unique interplay of text and image or visualize the inexpressible nature of this inherited burden. Key elements of transmitted trauma in graphic memoir include post memory and inherited trauma. Marion Hitch's concept of post memory, the experience of those who grow up dominated by narratives that preceded their birth, is crucial. Works like Artist Pigments, Moss, and Thibault is the best we could do exemplify this by exploring how children of survivors inherit trauma induced anxiety, guilt, and distorted family dynamics. Visualizing the inexpressible, graphic memoirs often use silence and visual metaphors to represent memories that are too complex or painful for words. In Moss, for example, the animal masks illustrate the persistent, inescapable nature of historical trauma on the second generation identity. Fragmented structure. The non-linear structure of comics mimics the disjointed nature of traumatic memory. Panels and gutters, space between panels, allow authors to show the disruptions and gaps in memory. Beyond words, the visual component allows for the depiction of emotional landscapes that cannot be fully conveyed through words, such as in Becoming Unbecoming by Una. Intergenerational impact. The trauma is not just a story passed down, it affects the psyche of the second generation, as seen in the strained relationship between Artie and his father in Moss. In addition to these important elements of inherited trauma, there is also a depiction of vicarious trauma in graphic memoir that also serves as an important element of this genre. Graphic memoirs provide a unique multimodal platform of depicting vicarious trauma, the shift in worldview, and internal experience that occurs when bearing witness to another's trauma. Through the intersection of text and images, artists like Rebecca Bloom in Vicarious Trauma Illustrated and Art Spligman in Moss make the emotional weight of secondary trauma tangible to the reader. So, the key aspects of vicarious trauma in graphic memoirs, visualizing the invisible, and graphic memoirs use visual metaphors to represent the unrepresentable nature of trauma. Panels can black out, distort, or break apart, mirroring the fragmentation of memory and trauma. The gutter as trauma space, as discussed earlier, this is the space between panel, the gutter, the act as site of interpretation where reader actively process the trauma, making the emotional experience embodied rather than merely intellectual. Layering time and memory. Graphic narratives such as Amy Kurzweil's Flying Coach can simultaneously present multiple generations of stories, showing how inherited or witnessed trauma affect the present. The artist as witness, many graphic memoirs, that is Moss, Becoming Unbecoming, explore the artist's own struggle as they digest the traumatic stories of others, often resulting in feeling of helpless, guilt, or fear. Embodiment and processing, the act of creating a reading these graphic narratives allows for a visual conversion that acts as a therapeutic tool for processing complex, often overwhelming, empathetic responses to others' suffering. So, the key examples of vicarious trauma in graphic memoirs illustrated Rebecca Bloom directly examines how therapeutic theories address vicarious trauma using art to process the emotional load of counseling work. Moss highlighting how the creator's own life is impacted by absorbing his father's Holocaust memories. Becoming Unbecoming, Una uses raw imagery to process gender violence, creating a horrific landscape represents nightmare and memory. Flying Coach, Amy Cruisewell intertwines generations of stories, demonstrating how the past is brought into the present through testimony. Having discussed the important element aspects and factors of graphic memoirs, the following are some of the notable examples of graphic memoirs. These several award winning works contribute in demonstrating the power of this emerging medium. First is A Smile by Raina Tellemare, the relatable account of childhood dental struggle and social challenges. A Smile by Rana is a graphic memoir detailing the author's traumatic middle school years, starting with a sixth grade accident that breaks her front teeth. Over 4 years, she undergoes extensive dental procedures, braces, surgeries, and headgear while navigating cruel friends, boy drama, earthquakes, and self esteem issues to ultimately find self confidence. They Called Us Enemy by George Takei, uh, a haunting memoir of Japanese American imprisonment during World War II. They Called Us Enemy is Takai's first hand account of those years behind barbed wire, the joys and terrors of growing up under legalized racism, his mother's hard choices, his father's faith in democracy, and the way those experiences planted the seeds for his astonishing future. Feeding Ghost by Tessa Hulse, an exploration of three generations of women and the impact of Chinese Revolution. Tessa Hull's 2025 Pulitzer Prize winning memoir Feeding Ghost is nothing short of extraordinary, carefully researched and created by the author over nearly a decade and filled with beautifully detailed etching like illustration that richly cover each page. This work tells not one but many stories that span three generations and as many continents. At the heart of the memoir is Hull's grandmother, Sun Yi's several mental illness and the devastating impact it has on generations of her family. It is told through the emotional and physical journey Hull takes with her mother, Rose, to piece together and comprehend this history, and set in the context of Sun Ye's life in China during the Japanese occupation, that is from 1937 to 1945, and the early years of the communist regime, that in 1949 to 1957. Hull's own experiences, interpretations, and reflections are accompanied by the powerful voices of Sun Yi's translated memoir written in 1958 and her mother's childhood journals. Hulse brings the reader along on his journey, retracing train rides, rediscovering sites of significance, such as her grandmother's apartment in Shanghai's, poring over historic documents and newspaper articles, and conducting countless interviews with family members. As Hulse tells us, the scale of what I have had to learn for this book has been so massive and so drawn out that I sometimes forget I began with only my three paltry grandmother's fact. In Limbo by Deb Zezeli, a story centered on mental health, heritage, and the experience of immigrating from South Korea. The graphic novel In Limbo, a graphic memoir, is a debut by work by Korean American artist Deb J.J. Lee, published on March 7, 2023. It is a poignant coming of age story that explores themes of cultural identity, mental health, and the immigrant experience. The memoir follows Deborah J. Lee, who immigrated from Korea to the United States as a child. Throughout her high school years in a New Jersey suburb, she struggles with a sense of otherness, feeling caught in a limbo between her Korean heritage and her American life. Lastly, let us discuss some of the unique advantages in the genre of graphic memoir. The graphic format is particularly effective for autobiographical works due to its multisensory nature. Showing versus telling, visuals can capture nuances of feeling, atmosphere, and body language that words alone struggle to express. Non-linear narrative layouts can easily jump between memories and the present day reflections, mirroring the way human memory actually works. Subjective perspective, artists can use abstract styles or visual metaphors to represent psychological states, trauma, or cultural identity. With this, I wrap up the discussion. The memory, the memoir, the gutters, and the panels in graphic medicine. Let us discuss some other topics based on health, humanity, and disability next time. Till then, thank you.